When they got married, Hunter only gave Emma 2 pounds of cornmeal as an engagement gift, but turned right around and gave 20 pounds of white flour to his childhood sweetheart, Natalie. Afterward, he explained to Emma that Natalie had a weak stomach and wasn't used to eating coarse grains. Furthermore, since Natalie was a college-educated girl preparing to move back to Chicago, they would inevitably need to rely on her family's connections. He claimed that taking extra care of her now was just him planning for their own future. Yet, Emma ended up eating those coarse grains for 15 long years. Later on, when Emma fell severely ill and was bedridden, Hunter knelt by her bed, crying and saying that he had failed to give her a decent life. But when his childhood sweetheart came to visit the sickbed, Hunter wiped away his tears, marched straight into the kitchen, and whipped up a bowl of fresh homemade noodles for her. Meanwhile, the meal he brought to Emma was still just 2 sweet potatoes. Emma took her final breath, harboring deep resentment. When she opened her eyes again, a 20-something Hunter was handing that same 2-pound bag of cornmeal toward her. She didn't take it. Hey guys, today's story is about Emma, who ditched her toxic fiancé right before the wedding to marry a disabled veteran instead. Let's see how this bold move changed her life. Instead, she turned to her parents and said, "Doesn't the Miller family still have their crippled second son, who just got discharged from the army? Why don't I marry him?" Upon hearing her words, the room fell dead silent. Not only were her parents stunned, but even Hunter, who was standing in the middle of the room, froze right in his tracks. Her mother was the first to react. She stepped forward, gripping Emma's wrist tightly, her voice sharp enough to pierce the roof. "Emma, what kind of nonsense are you spouting? You know full well that Wyatt is a cripple." Hunter snapped out of his daze as well. The gentle expression he had tried to fake completely vanished, replaced by a contemptuous smirk mixed with a sense of absurdity and sheer insult. He weighed the feather-light bag of grain in his hand, his expression turning cold. "Emma, what kind of nonsense are you talking about? You want to marry Wyatt? He's a cripple. Aside from a faded old army uniform, what does he even have? Are you going to marry him just to survive on watery gruel?" The bitterness and grievance that had built up over her 15 years in her past life still choked Emma's throat. Glancing at the purely symbolic engagement gift in his hand, her stomach churned in waves and her anger flared up. She spun around, grabbed the straw broom from behind the door, and swung it wildly at Hunter. "I don't give a damn about your 2 pounds of brand-mixed cornmeal. Take your trash and get out. Don't you ever show your face at my house again." Hunter was completely caught off guard. In the past, she had always been gentle and soft-spoken around him. The moment he even furrowed his brows, she would coax him with a sweet voice. Now, she was thrashing him relentlessly with a broom, making him stumble backward in fear. "Emma, you're crazy. What the hell are you doing?" he yelled as he dodged, putting up a tough front to hide his cowardice. His blue cotton shirt got struck by the broomhead, leaving a large streak of dust. He kept retreating until he reached the courtyard gate before finally finding his footing, a look of sheer disbelief still plastered on his face. Emma chased him all the way out the gate. She panted heavily, her chest heaving violently as she glared daggers at him. Perhaps terrified by the ruthlessness in her eyes, Hunter didn't dare step foot back inside the house. He stood there and adjusted his disheveled collar. A few seconds later, the panic on his face was quickly replaced by a smug, self-righteous arrogance. He even let out a sneer laced with sarcasm. "I wondered what this was all about. Turns out you're just complaining that my engagement gift isn't enough. Wake up, Emma, and look at where we are. In this day and age, 2 pounds of cornmeal out here in rural Kansas is already considered incredibly generous. Just look at the dirt-poor families in town. If they want to marry a wife, they couldn't even scrape together 2 pounds of cornmeal." Emma let out a cold laugh inwardly. He was right. In her past life, she had comforted herself with the exact same thought. Hunter was right. In this middle-of-nowhere boondock, 2 pounds of cornmeal really wasn't a small amount. But what was the actual result? Without blinking an eye, he had given all 20 pounds of refined white flour to that Natalie, the one who only knew how to complain about her stomach aches. Meanwhile, Emma, his rightful wife, was left to eat sweet potatoes and coarse grains for her entire life. Even when she was severely ill and bedridden, she couldn't exchange it all for a single hot bowl of noodles. Seeing her stay silent, Hunter assumed he had convinced her. A gleam of smugness flashed in his eyes as he stepped closer, offering the bag of cornmeal to her again. "All right, stop sulking. Why are you comparing yourself to a city girl? I liked you in the first place, because you're innocent and simple. You're much more reasonable than those spoiled, temperamental city girls. Be a good girl, accept the engagement gift, and in a few days, we'll pick a lucky date to hold the wedding." Emma stared at that bag of grain as if looking at the shackles that had bound her entire past life. Just as she was about to tell him to get lost, a loud shout came from the end of the alley. "Hunter! Natalie's stomach is acting up again. She was just at the general store, sweating bullets from the pain. She's looking for you." Hunter's expression changed instantly. He practically threw the bag of grain he was holding out to Emma onto the ground. Without a single word, he turned and sprinted toward the east end of town where Natalie lived, his footsteps so frantic they kicked up a cloud of dust. Emma watched his retreating figure, an unstoppable wave of bitterness rising in her chest. Images from her previous life overlapped with this very moment. It had been exactly the same in her past life. She had been overjoyed to accept his engagement gift and was in the middle of discussing their wedding date. Upon hearing about Natalie's stomachache, he had acted just like this, casting Emma aside without a second thought to run off and take care of his childhood sweetheart. She had been foolish enough to explain to her parents that Hunter had an emergency and would return in 2 days to resume their wedding talks. As a result, that very afternoon, she had seen him carrying 20 pounds of white flour to Natalie's house, even squatting on her doorstep to unwrap fruit candies for her. She used to foolishly comfort herself with the thought that he was only doing it for the sake of their future, and didn't actually have romantic feelings for Natalie. Thinking back on it now, the Emma of her past life was truly foolish beyond cure. And yet, she had somehow swallowed her grievances and lived her entire life with Hunter, but it didn't matter anymore. Since God had given her a chance to live again, there was absolutely no way she would repeat the same mistakes. While she was lost in thought, her mother rushed out of the house. Catching sight of the bag of coarse grain sitting alone on the ground, she hurriedly bent down to pick it up. "Oh my, why did Hunter leave? Weren't we supposed to have lunch together and discuss the wedding?" Emma quickly grabbed her mother's arm and moved the bag of coarse grain back outside the door. She turned and said seriously, "I already told you, I'm not marrying Hunter anymore." Hearing this, her mother yanked Emma into the main house and slammed the door shut. The moment they were inside, she yelled at Emma's father, "Old man, come look at this. Has our Emma been possessed by something? Why is she spouting such nonsense today?" She even went as far as saying she won't marry Hunter. Hearing her mother's words, a piercing ache of sorrow welled up in Emma's heart. In her past life, she had fallen in love at first sight with Hunter, the educated city youth, when he first came to the countryside. She had helped him with his chores and followed him around every single day. Who in this town didn't know that she was in love with Hunter? From the very beginning, her parents had disapproved of this marriage. Her father had warned that Hunter's eyes were too evasive, his heart was unsteady, and he wasn't someone she could rely on to build a steady life. Later, when someone saw Hunter bringing food to Natalie, her mother had held Emma's hands and cried, saying, "Emma, if this man already has someone else in his heart, if you marry him, you'll be destined to a cold, loveless marriage your whole life." What did she say back then? She had patted her chest and assured her mother that Hunter and Natalie were just ordinary friends. She claimed that he only took care of Natalie because he needed her father's help with the paperwork to transfer his residency back to the city. Once his residency was settled, he would definitely treat her well. But what was the result? Later on, when her mother suffered a brain hemorrhage and was hospitalized, Hunter took Natalie to the county town to buy new clothes, and Emma didn't even make it back in time to see her mother one last time. He only dawdled back on the day of the funeral, and even had the nerve to blame her for not letting him know in advance, complaining that she had made him miss Natalie's birthday. "Emma, what in the world are you thinking?" Her father's heavy sigh pulled her out of her surging memories. She swallowed the lump in her throat, grasped her mother's calloused hand, and tried to keep her voice steady. "Mom, Dad, I'm not possessed. I'm serious. I'm really not marrying Hunter anymore." Her father was so anxious he scratched his head in frustration. "Foolish, you're being absolutely foolish. Who in this town doesn't know you've been in love with Hunter for years? Now that we've finally reached the point of discussing marriage, how can you suddenly say you're backing out? Where does that leave our pride? How will the people in town gossip about us? How do you expect your mother and me to hold our heads up in public? If you make a scene like this, who will ever marry you in the future?" Her mother stood beside him, wiping away her tears. "He's right, Emma. Why do this? Even though Hunter might mess up sometimes, he's an educated young man. With his knowledge, he might even be able to move back to the city one day. Why throw a tantrum and decide to marry a crippled army veteran?" Emma took a deep breath and recounted the entire story of Hunter giving Natalie 20 pounds of fine white flour, while only offering her 2 pounds of coarse cornmeal. "Mom, Dad, think about it. The difference between 2 pounds and 20 pounds isn't that gap obvious enough? I see right through him now. In his heart, he has never truly valued me. That's why I am determined to never marry him." Her mother was so furious her hands trembled, cursing, "That ungrateful bastard." But after her outburst, she frowned and grabbed Emma's hand again. "Fine, if you won't marry him, then you won't. But you can't marry Wyatt either. Even though he isn't completely bedridden, he definitely can't do heavy physical labor. How are you two supposed to survive in the future? End quote. Emma thought of Wyatt. In her past life, she hadn't interacted with him much, only remembering him as a man of few words who always kept to himself. Everyone in the Miller family disliked him. They gossiped that he had a perfectly good opportunity to stay in the countryside, but stubbornly ran off to join the army instead. As a result, he came back with a crippled leg and had to rely on the Miller family to feed him. But Emma felt he was actually a kind and warm-hearted person. In her previous life, when she was pregnant with her first child, Hunter had taken a mildly sick Natalie on a trip to the county town. Left alone at home, Emma had slipped while carrying water, resulting in a miscarriage. Hunter was nowhere to be found, and he never even replied to the letters she sent him. It was Wyatt who secretly brought her brown sugar and boiled eggs. He had even shoved his hard-earned veteran severance ration coupons into her hands, telling her to nourish her body. But she couldn't tell her parents about any of that, so she had to make up an excuse. Mom, Dad, last month when I went up to the back mountain to forage for wild greens, I almost fell off a cliff. It was Wyatt who saved me. Even though his leg is crippled, he is an honest and reliable man, much better than a smooth talker like Hunter. If I marry him, at least he won't save all the good things for an outsider, and I won't be left to starve. Her parents looked at each other and sighed. They were terrified that breaking off this engagement would ruin her reputation, leaving her unmarriageable and her life ruined. Her father remained silent for a long time before finally nodding. All right, tomorrow, I'll have someone go over to the Miller family and ask. We'll set up a meeting first. If Wyatt agrees, you two can see how things go. If it doesn't work out, we'll figure out another way. Anyway, we absolutely cannot let you marry a ruthless wolf like Hunter, her father added. I know, Emma replied immediately. Ultimately, her father secretly returned that 2-pound bag of coarse grain to where Hunter was staying. The next day, the Miller family sent word back, saying that Wyatt had agreed to meet. Emma followed her father into town and observed him from a distance. He was wearing a faded old army uniform, standing perfectly straight, though it was obvious his left leg lacked strength. She didn't go up to speak with him. Instead, her father walked over and talked to him for a long time. She didn't ask what exactly they discussed, but after they returned home, her father let out a heavy sigh and nodded. If you have really thought this through, then you can go ahead with this marriage. Emma breathed a sigh of relief. The heavy boulder that had been hanging in her heart finally half lifted. In this life, she never wanted to relive the days of not even being able to eat a warm bite of decent food. Marrying Wyatt meant that, at the very least, he was an honest man who wouldn't just feed her sweet potatoes. If he had a piece of meat to eat, she would definitely get to drink a bowl of hot soup. Furthermore, she vaguely recalled rumors from her past life that after Wyatt left the Miller family, he had apparently done quite well for himself, doing business on the outside. Later on, Hunter had even written a letter to him. She didn't know what Wyatt's reply had said, but upon receiving the letter, Hunter had thrown a fit, cursing loudly at home and calling Wyatt an ungrateful, heartless bastard. In this life, she didn't care what love was. She only needed to be well-fed and warmly clothed. If Wyatt could give her these things, that would be enough. The next day, Emma went to work in the fields as usual. When work ended at noon, she packed up her farming tools and got ready to head home for lunch. Just as she reached the old locust tree at the edge of town, she ran into Hunter and Natalie. Natalie looked the same as always, wearing a clean, small floral print blouse. Her face was pale, and she had to stop and pant after every few steps, looking as fragile as if a gust of wind could blow her over. Hunter was tagging closely beside her, carrying a basket in his hand that seemed to hold a few eggs. The moment he saw Emma, Hunter's expression instantly became complicated. He glanced at her twice, and seeing that she still wasn't taking the initiative to speak, a look of annoyance appeared on his face. Emma, how are things? Have you picked the wedding date yet? Tell me which day we are holding it so I know to prepare in advance. Emma rolled her eyes, too lazy to even care about him, and lifted her foot to walk away. Natalie immediately reached out and grabbed Hunter's arm, her weak voice carrying a hint of a sob. Emma, please don't blame Hunter. My stomach was hurting yesterday, which is why he couldn't make it to discuss the wedding with you. It's all my fault. If you're angry, just scold me, but please don't take it out on Hunter. As soon as she finished speaking, Hunter's heart immediately ached for her. He patted her back and coaxed her with a few gentle words before turning his head to snap at Emma. Emma, stop being so unreasonable, and don't blame Natalie. She has a weak constitution to begin with. Besides, it's just picking a wedding date. Whether I'm there or not, the result of the discussion is the same anyway, isn't it? Emma looked at his high and mighty face and how naturally he protected the other woman, and the only things left in her heart were numbness and sarcasm. She nodded, her tone flat and completely unruffled. "You're right. You didn't need to be there to begin with." Hunter probably didn't expect her to say that, and his face darkened. "Emma, could you not speak in such a weird, passive-aggressive tone?" Just as he finished speaking, an auntie from town walked by carrying a basket. Seeing Emma, she called out loudly, "Emma, why haven't you headed home yet? The Miller family just sent someone over to your house to propose." Hearing the words, "the Miller family propose," Hunter's eyes instantly lit up. A smug look appeared on his face as he glanced at Emma, his tone filled with arrogance as if he were bestowing a great favor upon her. "Emma, I knew it. You were just upset that I gave you too small of an engagement gift last time, so you secretly ran off to tattle to my parents, right? All right then. Since my parents have already swallowed their pride and come over to make up for the engagement gift, you can stop throwing a tantrum now. Hurry home with me to discuss the wedding date," he said, reaching out to grab her arm. Emma took a step back and shook off his hand, almost laughing out of sheer anger. She had seen overconfident people before, but she had never seen anyone this delusional. "Hunter, do you have no shame? Who said they wanted to marry you?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was very clear. A few villagers walking by stopped and looked over. Unable to save face, Hunter's cheeks turned beet red. Just as he was about to open his mouth to scold her, Natalie beside him suddenly let out a soft groan. She clutched her stomach and squatted down, her face as white as a sheet of paper. "Hunter, my stomach hurts. It hurts so much." Her voice trembled like a leaf in the autumn wind. Her eyes immediately turned red, and tears cascaded down her face. Hunter no longer had the mind to argue with Emma. He immediately squatted down to help her up, so heartbroken that even his voice changed. "Natalie, how are you? Did we walk too fast just now? I'll take you home. I still have some candy in my pocket. Have a piece for now." He carefully supported Natalie, his footsteps as hurried as if his pants were on fire. He didn't even spare a single glance at Emma. As they walked past, Natalie tilted her head and smirked at her. She gave a smug, provocative smile, the painful expression from just a moment ago vanishing without a trace. Emma didn't even bother to give her a second glance. What an idiot. She could fight over Hunter all she wanted for now. One day, she would be the one crying. Emma turned around and headed home. As soon as she entered the courtyard, she saw the table in the main house piled high with things. 20 pounds of pure white flour sat neatly at the corner of the table, the cloth bag still bearing the red stamp of the grain station. Next to it was a yard of dark blue synthetic fabric. Smooth to the touch, it was the most fashionable material available right now. A girl in town getting married only needed half a yard of this fabric for a new outfit to brag about for half a year. There were also 2 packages of fruit candies wrapped in oil paper, with bright red apples printed on the wrappers. Just untying the string released a sweet fragrance. Her mother was stroking the fabric, her hands trembling. When she saw Emma, she couldn't stop smiling. "Emma, you're back. Look at how honest this Wyatt boy is. He just carried all these things over himself and left before he even had time to wipe his sweat. He said he was afraid you'd be too shy to meet him, and that he'll come back whenever you want to see him." Her father was squatting on the doorstep, smoking. The wrinkles on his face had smoothed out. He tapped his pipe and chuckled. "I just weighed that white flour. It's a full 21 pounds. He gave an extra pound, and even gave an extra 2 ounces of candy. This boy is 10,000 times better than a heartless wolf like Hunter." Wyatt said earlier that his side has no demands. He only asked what you like, and when you want the wedding to be. It'll be whatever day you say. The engagement gifts are all yours. We 2 old folks won't touch a single bit of it. You can keep it as your own private savings. Emma looked at the engagement gifts piled high on the table, remembering Hunter's feather-light 2-pound bag of brand-mixed coarse grain from her past life. Her nose stung, and she almost shed tears. In her entire previous life, she had never even seen 10 pounds of white flour pass through Hunter's hands. Now, Wyatt hadn't said much, yet he had brought the absolute best things right here. Emma sniffled, smiled, and nodded. "Mom, Dad, let's just set it for the 18th of next month. A good date." "Great." Her father immediately agreed, standing up to head out and find the fortune teller to check the almanac, his footsteps noticeably lighter. Her mother took her hand and shoved the stack of fabric into it. "Tomorrow, I'll take you to town to find a tailor to make you 2 new outfits. You need to look beautiful on your wedding day, so the whole town will be jealous that our Emma married into a good family." Emma stroked the smooth fabric, her heart incredibly warm. The sunlight streaming through the window fell on the bag of white flour, so bright it was almost dazzling. She knew that her good life in this lifetime was only just beginning. After getting engaged, Wyatt almost every few days would come over to her house to check in. He didn't talk much. He just got straight to work as soon as he arrived. He would show up at the crack of dawn, carrying water to fill their water vat to the brim, chopping wood and stacking it neatly against the wall. He even swept their yard spotless. Sometimes he went hunting in the mountains. If he caught a wild hare or pheasant, he would clean it perfectly, stuff the belly with wild onions and spices, place it in her kitchen, and say, "To nourish your health." Then he would turn and leave immediately, without even staying for a sip of water. Once, she casually mentioned that she loved eating roasted sweet potatoes when she was little. The very next day, he brought back 2 perfectly charred, fragrant roasted sweet potatoes from the mountain. He had kept them tucked inside his coat against his chest to keep them warm. When he handed them to her, his military coat was still dusted with charcoal soot. She took a bite. It was so sweet it stuck to her teeth, more delicious than anything she had ever eaten in her previous life. Emma discovered that Wyatt wasn't just thoughtful, but he was also educated and good at math. When her father couldn't calculate his work credits, Wyatt sat down and, in a matter of minutes, clearly tallied up the credits for the past half year. He even managed to reclaim 2 credits that the foreman had miscalculated. She grew more and more satisfied with him. Sometimes, she would sew a patch on his clothes or make him a pair of cloth shoes. When he received them, his ears would turn bright red. He would hold back for a long time before finally uttering a thank you. As soon as he turned around, he would immediately slip the cloth shoes onto his feet, his stride noticeably more spirited than usual. As for Hunter, he still thought she was just throwing a tantrum, waiting every day for her to come crawling back and beg him. Occasionally, when he ran into her in the fields, he would deliberately put on a cold face, pretending not to care. "Emma, if you're done throwing your fit, just come back. I'm still willing to marry you. Overdoing it will only make people sick of you." She was too lazy to even acknowledge him. She just shouldered her hoe and walked straight past, treating him like thin air. He was so furious, he stomped his feet and scolded her for not knowing what was good for her, but she didn't even bother to look back. The gossipy women in town loved to chatter, especially Mrs. Higgins. Previously, she had wanted her daughter to marry Hunter, but he had rejected her. Now, facing Emma, she seized the opportunity to make sarcastic remarks. "Oh my, isn't this Emma?" She gave up an educated young man and insisted on throwing herself at a cripple. There will come a day when she cries her eyes out. If he can't do heavy lifting, are they going to survive on watery gruel? The other women chimed in, laughing maliciously. That's right. Hunter is such a good catch. He'll even get to move back to the city later on. By then, it'll be too late for her to regret it." Just as Emma was about to open her mouth to fire back, a deep, husky male voice suddenly rang out from behind her. "If Mrs. Higgins likes Hunter so much, why don't you marry your daughter off to him?" Emma turned around and saw Wyatt standing behind her, carrying 2 wild pheasants. His face was as cold as ice. As his gaze swept over the group of women, they instantly fell dead silent. Wyatt took a step forward, handed the pheasants to her, and then turned to say to Mrs. Higgins, "When Hunter gets married, he only gives 2 pounds of coarse grain as an engagement gift. Furthermore, he has to take care of his childhood sweetheart. If your daughter marries him, she'd be just in time to help him serve someone else. Since it's such a great deal, why don't you take it?" Mrs. Higgins's face instantly turned an ugly shade of purple. She opened her mouth but couldn't utter a single word for a long time. She meekly picked up her basket and slunk away, and the other women quickly scattered as well. Emma looked at Wyatt's side profile and couldn't help but burst into laughter. Seeing her laugh, his ears turned red again. He scratched his head and said, If they bully you again in the future, just tell me. I'll scold them for you." "Okay," she nodded, her heart as sweet as honey. That afternoon, she went up to the back mountain to forage for wild greens. From a distance, she saw 2 men in military uniforms standing behind a tree. One of them was Wyatt. The other man was wearing a crisp, perfectly ironed uniform with gleaming epaulets on his shoulders, speaking to Wyatt with his head bowed in a deeply respectful manner. She was just about to walk over when she saw Hunter walking by with a hoe over his shoulder. As soon as he spotted Wyatt, he immediately started mocking him. "Oh, Wyatt, is this your crippled old army buddy from before? Don't tell me you're here to borrow money," Hunter sneered. "Let me tell you, our family doesn't have any money to lend to broke, penniless soldiers like you guys." The man in the military uniform immediately furrowed his brows. He was just about to speak when Wyatt waved a hand to stop him. Wyatt cast a cold glance at Hunter and then completely ignored him. Having brought this humiliation upon himself, Hunter spat on the ground, muttered some curses, and walked away. Waiting until Hunter was out of sight, the man lowered his voice and said, "Captain, are you just going to let him insult you like that? Do you need me to—" "No need," Wyatt interrupted. "I'm heading back to the base soon. There's no point in stooping to his level. Is the official housing sorted out?" "It's all set. 2 bedrooms and a living room. The furniture is fully furnished, just waiting for your return." "All right, I got it. You head back first. I'll return to the unit at the end of the month." Hiding behind the tree, Emma couldn't clearly hear what they were saying. She only saw the man salute Wyatt before turning and leaving. Wyatt stood there for a moment before turning back toward the town, acting as if absolutely nothing had happened. Emma didn't ask him about it. Everyone had their own secrets. When he wanted to tell her, he naturally would. Still, she couldn't help but be amazed inwardly. This husband, she had seemingly chosen on a whim, probably had a true identity that was far from ordinary. As the wedding day drew nearer, Emma and Wyatt began their preparations. Wyatt took out all the military allowance he had saved up over the years, a thick stack of cash and ration coupon sand, shoved it into her hands. "Buy whatever you see fit," he told her. "Get whatever you like. If it's not enough, I still have more." Emma took the money to town and found a tailor to make 2 new outfits. A stunning, bright red wedding dress beautifully embroidered with peonies, and a small floral print synthetic blouse for everyday wear. Wyatt also bought her parents 2 tins of malted milk and 2 pounds of walnut powder. The 2 old folks couldn't stop smiling. Whenever they met anyone, they would praise Wyatt for being thoughtful and filial. During that time, Hunter spent every single day hovering around Natalie. He exchanged all his work credits and allowance for refined grain and brown sugar to bring to her, while he himself gnawed on sweet potatoes for every meal. His face grew sallow and gaunt, his eyes deeply sunken. He was still completely deluded, thinking that Emma was still waiting for him. He didn't even believe the news that she and Wyatt were getting married, assuming it was just a rumor she had deliberately spread to make him jealous. One day, he purposely blocked the door to her house, holding 2 freezing cold sweet potatoes. Putting on a fake front, he said, "Emma, I know you're just doing this to make me mad. I brought you some sweet potatoes. They're your favorite. Can you stop throwing this tantrum now?" Emma was just about to speak when Wyatt walked in from outside carrying a bucket of fish. Seeing Hunter blocking the door, his face instantly turned cold. "What are you doing here?" Wyatt's voice was as cold as ice. Seeing Wyatt made Hunter even more furious. He pointed a finger at Emma and scolded, "Emma, you've really outdone yourself. Not only did you spread stupid rumors about marrying Wyatt to make me jealous, but now you're addicted to tattling too? Let me tell you, when it comes to the Miller family's business, a cripple that nobody cares about like him has no right to interfere. You better come home with me right now, or don't blame me for not showing you any mercy." He said this and tried to lunge forward to grab her. Wyatt took a step forward, shielding Emma behind his back. With one hand, he clamped down on Hunter's wrist. Applying just a little pressure, Hunter cried out in pain. The sweet potatoes in his hands dropped to the ground, getting covered in dirt. "If you dare come here and harass her again, I'll break your legs." Wyatt's eyes were terrifyingly fierce. Hunter was so scared he shuddered violently, hastily snatching his hand back and retreating several steps. Right at that moment, Mrs. Jenkins from next door walked by with a basket. Seeing Emma, she smiled and called out, "Emma, you 2 are set to get married on the 18th, right? I'll come over early that day to lend a hand." "Yes, Mrs. Jenkins will be troubling you then," Emma replied with a smile. Hearing this, Hunter immediately looked smug. He chuckled, brushed the dust off his clothes, and seized the opportunity to say, "The wedding date is set. Why didn't you tell me? On one hand, you say you won't marry me, but on the other hand, you're already preparing for the wedding. Emma, I am the only one who would be willing to put up with a thick-skinned woman like you," he said. Just as he finished speaking, Tommy, a young boy from town, came running over, panting heavily. He shouted from a distance, "Hunter, this is bad. I just saw Natalie in the county town. She was holding hands with a guy in a fancy suit strolling through the department store. He even bought her a new watch. I saw it with my own eyes." The smile on Hunter's face instantly froze, and his face turned as white as a sheet. Glaring at Tommy, he scolded, "You're talking nonsense. Natalie isn't that kind of person." "I'm not talking nonsense. A lot of people saw it. He even bought her an ice cream," Tommy argued, his neck turning red from the effort. Hunter's face alternated between flushed red and deathly pale. He stood frozen in place for a few seconds. He no longer had the mind to settle the score with Emma. Instead, he turned and sprinted straight toward the county town. Because he was running so frantically, he stepped in a mud puddle and almost fell flat on his face, looking absolutely pathetic. Emma watched his retreating figure and couldn't help but laugh out loud. A leopard never changes its spots. How could someone as snobbish and ambitious as Natalie actually marry a penniless, broke young man like Hunter? Hunter was definitely getting played. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, it was the 1/8 the day of the wedding. Emma wore her stunning, bright red wedding dress. Her hair was braided into 2 pigtails, adorned with 2 bright red flowers. Her mother applied a bit of makeup on her. Looking at herself in the mirror, her face was flushed red. The courtyard was packed with townspeople who had come to celebrate and drink wedding wine. The atmosphere was incredibly lively. Her parents couldn't stop smiling, taking turns handing out wedding candies to everyone. Suddenly, the ringing of a bicycle bell came from outside. Someone shouted, "The groom is here!" Emma went to the door to look. Wyatt was wearing his clean, faded old army uniform, standing next to a 28-inch bicycle tied with red silk ribbons. His posture was perfectly straight. Even though his left leg was a bit weak, he stood very upright. A rare smile bloomed on his face. When he looked at her, his ears turned bright red. He stepped forward and carefully supported her, afraid she might fall. Lifting her onto the back seat of the bicycle, he lowered his voice and said, "Hold on tight, we're going home." "Okay." Emma wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her face against his back. Catching the faint scent of soap on him, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Just as they were about to leave, a furious roar came from a distance. "Emma, stop right there." Emma lifted her head to look. Hunter, wearing a new synthetic fabric shirt that he must have saved up for a long time to buy, his hair slicked back smoothly, came running over in a hurry, carrying half a pound of assorted candies. His face was full of sheer disbelief. He dashed in front of them and spread his arms to block their path. His eyes were bloodshot as he pointed at her and bellowed, "Emma, are you crazy? You are my wife. How could you marry him? Get down here right now." The surrounding townspeople instantly fell silent, followed immediately by bursts of roaring laughter. "Hunter, are you sleepwalking? Emma and Wyatt have been engaged for half a month now. Since when is she your wife?" Someone mocked. "That's right. At first, you gave her 2 pounds of coarse grain as an engagement gift, then turned right around and brought 20 pounds of white flour to Natalie." "Who would want to marry you?" Another chimed in. "Only a sick person would marry you. I think he's gone crazy from wanting a wife." The gossiping words from the crowd felt like slaps landing on Hunter's face. His face turned as red as a pig's liver. Pointing at Wyatt, he cursed, "You cripple. You dare steal my wife? I'll beat you to death." With that, he lunged forward, intending to hit Wyatt. Wyatt held the bicycle handlebars with one hand, and with a light push from the other, Hunter was shoved 10 feet away, tumbling straight into a mud pit by the side of the road. His brand new synthetic shirt was instantly smeared with a massive streak of black mud, making him look utterly pathetic. "She is my wife," Wyatt said coldly. "If you dare spout nonsense again, I won't show you any mercy." Wyatt's voice was as cold as ice, his gaze sweeping over Hunter. Hunter was so terrified he trembled violently, sitting in the mud pit for a long time, unable to get up. Sitting on the back seat of the bicycle, Emma looked coldly at Hunter, enunciating every word clearly. "Hunter, listen to me carefully. No one ever agreed to marry you. My father returned your 2 pounds of bran-mixed coarse grain to you a long time ago. The person I have always wanted to marry is Wyatt. Now get out of the way, and don't ruin our big day." Sitting in the mud puddle, Hunter looked at her, then at the villagers who were laughing at him. Having lost all face, he still stubbornly hollered, "What's so good about marrying a cripple? He's just a poor soldier. You're definitely going to suffer with him in the future, eating sweet potatoes for every meal. There will come a day when you regret this." "Whether I regret it or not is none of your business," Emma replied, too lazy to even care anymore. She gently patted Wyatt's waist. "Let's go." Wyatt steadily pedaled the bicycle forward. As the wind brushed through her hair, Emma hugged his waist, listening to the congratulatory cheers of the surrounding villagers, her heart overflowing with sweetness. Sitting in the mud pit, Hunter watched their retreating figures, clenching his fists tightly. His gaze was terrifyingly sinister, as if he were brewing some malicious scheme. Emma didn't even bother to care about him. Now that she had Wyatt and a good life, Hunter's petty little tricks couldn't hurt her. Arriving at Wyatt's place, she saw that although it was just a small house, it was kept neat and tidy. Red double happiness paper cutouts were pasted on the walls, and melon seeds and fruit candies were laid out on the table. There was also a large basin of steamed white flour buns and a pot of braised pork, exuding a rich, savory aroma. During dinner that evening, Wyatt picked up a large piece of braised pork, placed it in her bowl, and said in a low voice, "From now on, I'll cook meat for you every day. I won't let you suffer any grievances." Emma took a bite of the braised pork. It was fatty but not greasy, and so delicious that she almost shed tears. In her entire past life, she had barely eaten a hot piece of braised pork a handful of times. Now, finally, she no longer had to live those miserable days. Life after marriage was even better than she had imagined. Wyatt truly spoiled her to the bone. Every morning when she woke up, he had already boiled hot water and squeezed toothpaste onto her toothbrush. Millet porridge and boiled eggs were kept warm in a pot on the stove. He wouldn't let her go down to the fields to do heavy labor, saying that farm work was exhausting and he could handle it all by himself. When she insisted on going to earn work credits, he would finish her share of the work in advance, letting her sit and rest in the shade of a tree while he picked wild berries for her to eat. There was never a shortage of refined grain in the house. Every few days, he would go up the mountain to hunt wild hares, pheasants, and partridges. Sometimes, he even managed to catch a roe deer. He found every possible way to make delicious meals for her. He also knew how to make paper-thin, handmade noodles. Served in bone broth and sprinkled with chopped scallions, they were so fragrant that she could easily eat 2 large bowls in one sitting. Originally sallow and gaunt, Emma's face filled out after just half a month of being well-nourished. Her skin became fair, and her complexion looked incredibly healthy. Whenever the aunties in town saw her, they praised her for getting prettier by the day, saying she had married the right man. Hearing these words, Hunter was extremely unconvinced. He went around spouting nonsense, claiming that Wyatt's money all came from his veteran severance pay and that eating through one's savings would eventually deplete them. When that time comes, Emma will have to survive on watery gruel with him, he claimed. Sooner or later, she'll come crawling back to beg me. Upon hearing this, Emma merely laughed and didn't take it to heart at all. As the days went by, the relationship between Emma and Wyatt only grew stronger. Although he was a man of few words, he took care of everything for her perfectly, so she never had to worry about a thing. She had thought life would just continue peacefully and happily like this. That was until the day Hunter brought Natalie to the Miller family's house to officially meet his parents, which happened to be exactly when Wyatt brought Emma over, saying they needed to pick up a few things. Only then did Emma learn that when Hunter originally heard the news about Natalie meeting a man in the city, he had rushed over in a panic but couldn't find them. Natalie had thrown a crying fit, accusing Hunter of not trusting her, and Hunter had to buy her ice cream just to coax her back. After Emma married Wyatt, Hunter and Natalie essentially went public with their relationship. Wasn't that why he was in such a hurry to bring her home to meet the family now? As soon as Emma and Wyatt stepped through the door of the Miller family's house, they heard Hunter's mother laughing. Seeing them enter, her laughter abruptly stopped, and her face instantly pulled into a long, sour scowl. Natalie was sitting next to Hunter, wearing a new, small floral print blouse with her hair styled in wavy curls. Seeing Emma, she called out her name in a sickeningly sweet, affected voice, deliberately leaning closer against Hunter with a smug look on her face. Hunter's mother curled her lips in a sneer. "Oh my, isn't this Emma? The one who swore up and down that she would marry our Hunter? What are you doing here now? Regretting it? Just look at our Natalie. A city girl with fair, delicate skin, and 100 times more educated than you. If you hadn't thrown such a tantrum back then, you would be Hunter's wife right now. It wouldn't have even been Natalie's turn. You must be regretting it now, aren't you?" Before Emma could say a word, Wyatt shielded her behind his back and spoke coldly. "We just came back to pick up some things. We'll leave as soon as we get them. We won't get in your way." "Pick up a trunk?" Hunter's mother immediately jumped to her feet, putting her hands on her hips as she scolded him. "What trunk of yours? That's the Miller family's property. Don't even dream of taking it away." "Let me tell you, Wyatt, you were raised by the Miller family. Now that your brother is getting married, Natalie is demanding a $500 bride price, plus the 3 big items, a watch, a bicycle, and a sewing machine, along with a radio. You better hand over $500 right now. If not, don't even think about taking anything away. We'll even go to the town council to report you for being unfilial, and have them send you off to a labor reform camp." Emma was stunned listening to this. She genuinely couldn't understand why the Miller parents treated the 2 brothers with such a world of difference. Hunter chimed in from the side. "That's right. You ate our food and drank our water. Now that I'm getting married, it's only natural that you hand over $500. Don't even try to weasel out of this debt." Natalie nestled in Hunter's arms, looking at Emma smugly, her eyes seemingly saying, "Look, Hunter still listens to whatever I say." Emma was trembling with anger. Just as she was about to speak up, Wyatt suddenly let out a laugh filled with a chilling coldness. "You want $500? Fine." Wyatt pulled a yellowed piece of paper from his pocket and slapped it heavily onto the table. "First, return my biological parents' death pension to me. Then, I'll give you $500 right away." "What death pension? I don't know what you're talking about." Hunter's mother's face instantly turned deathly pale. Her eyes darted away, not daring to look at Wyatt. "You don't know?" Wyatt sneered. "In 1968, when my parents died in the line of duty, the military issued a $1,200 death pension. You were the one who signed for and received the money. This is the receipt issued by the military. Do I need to take you all to the town council to have the leaders settle this? Let's see where exactly that money went." You embezzled the death pension of fallen heroes. Shouldn't we settle this debt properly? Hunter's mother immediately collapsed into her chair, her face as white as a sheet, unable to utter a single word. Hunter was also stunned. He had never known about this death pension. He glared at his mother and asked, "Mom, is what he's saying true? Did our family really receive a $1,200 pension?" I. Hunter's mother stammered for a long time, unable to say anything. Hunter's father, who was squatting on the doorstep smoking, lowered his head deeply, not daring to make a sound. "I don't have time to spout nonsense with you all." Wyatt put the receipt away, walked into the inner room, and carried out an old battered wooden trunk. He grabbed Emma's hand and walked straight out the door. "From today onwards, I have no relationship whatsoever with you and the Miller family. Moving forward, we mind our own business. Don't come looking for me or cause any trouble. Otherwise, I will report this to the town council and let everyone see what kind of people the Miller family truly are." After saying this, Wyatt took Emma's hand and led her outside. Looking at Wyatt's back, Emma's heart ached. No wonder the Miller parents hadn't treated him well. It turned out they weren't his biological parents. She held on to him, her voice still choked with emotion. "Why don't I take you to my parents' house?" Wyatt turned to look at her, his gaze softening, and lowered his voice. "Can we go back in a few days? Right now, I want to take you somewhere very nice." Looking at his side profile, Emma nodded and squeezed his hand tightly. No matter where he took her, she would follow him. She had originally thought that since he had suffered such a grievance, he wanted to take her somewhere to clear his mind. She was even trying to figure out how to comfort him, telling him that losing the money didn't matter, that they would work hard together, and sooner or later, they would earn it back. There was no need to stoop to the Miller family's level. Since he had lost his home, her home would be his home from now on. But he kept walking further and further, heading straight out of town and toward the county seat. After walking for about an hour, they arrived at the gates of the military base in the county. 2 armed sentries stood tall and straight at the gate. Emma was still bewildered when the sentries, catching sight of Wyatt, immediately stood at attention, saluted, and shouted loudly, "Good day, Captain Miller." Emma was frozen on the spot, staring blankly for a long time, unable to process what was happening. Captain Miller? Wasn't Wyatt a discharged disabled veteran? How had he suddenly become a captain? Seeing Emma's bewildered expression, Wyatt couldn't help but laugh. He rubbed her head and explained, "I'm sorry, Emma. I didn't mean to hide this from you. I wasn't discharged. I injured my left leg during a mission, and the unit made a special exception for me to take half a year of leave to rest and recover at home. I originally planned to return to the unit once the injury healed. But then I met you, and you wanted to marry me. I was afraid you'd be worried, so I didn't say anything. I had already submitted an application for official housing at the unit, and it's been approved. From now on, you'll live with me at the base. You won't have to suffer in the countryside anymore." He took her hand and led her into the inner area of the base, stopping in front of a row of clean, single-story houses. He took out a key and unlocked one of the doors. The apartment wasn't large, 12 bedrooms and a living room, but it was neatly arranged. The walls were painted a pristine white, and a brand-new mattress was laid out on the bed. A thermos and teacups sat on the table. In the kitchen cupboards, there was an ample supply of rice, flour, cooking oil, and meat. There was also a large basket of eggs and half a bag of white sugar, all essential supplies issued by the unit. "We'll live here from now on," Wyatt said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on the top of her head. "Next month, I'll be promoted to Deputy Battalion Commander, and my salary will increase. From now on, you can buy whatever you want to eat. There's no need to pinch pennies. You'll never have to eat sweet potatoes or coarse grains again." Emma looked at everything in the room, then at Wyatt's gentle face. Her nose stung, and tears fell uncontrollably. In her past life, she had lived her entire life eating coarse grains and sweet potatoes. Even before she died of a severe illness, she hadn't been able to eat a single hot bowl of handmade noodles. In this life, she had only made one different choice, yet she had gained all of this. She turned around, hugged Wyatt's waist, and buried her face in his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. "Wyatt, thank you. Thank you for giving me such a good life." "You silly girl, why are you being so polite with me?" Wyatt patted her back, gently coaxing her. "Our life is only going to get better from now on. Once we're settled, we'll bring your parents to live with us so they can enjoy a comfortable life." "Okay." Emma nodded through her tears, her heart feeling incredibly warm. In the days that followed, Emma fully settled into life at the base. The families of the soldiers on the base were exceptionally welcoming. Knowing she was Captain Miller's wife, they all came by with gifts and taught her the ropes of living on the base. Every morning, Wyatt went to train and came back to eat with her. During the day, he trained, At night, he came home on time to be by her side. He was never late. Every month, the military unit distributed allowances. Rice, flour, cooking oil, and meat were all provided, so they didn't even need to buy them. Wyatt also handed his entire salary over to Emma. The money in her hands grew more and more, and she could buy whatever she wanted to eat. Her life was incredibly free and comfortable. She gained 10 pounds, her complexion improved by the day, and she looked countless times more beautiful than when she was living in town. Once, she went out to town with a few other military wives to buy some things and bumped into Natalie and another educated youth strolling through the department store. Seeing Emma dressed so beautifully and carrying bags full of good food, Natalie's face turned green. She stared at her for a long time before finally storming off in anger. Emma didn't even care about her. Whether Natalie lived well or not had nothing to do with her. Emma's current life was 100 times better than hers. Meanwhile, the engagement between Hunter and Natalie quickly fell apart. Natalie demanded a bride price of $1,000, plus the 3 big items and a radio. The Miller family simply had no money. That $1,200 death pension had long been squandered away completely, so they couldn't possibly come up with it. Natalie had always looked down on Hunter anyway. On that very day, Emma saw her at the department store with that other educated youth. That guy had promised her a $1,000 bride price and offered to use his father's connections to get her a job at the county's general store. She immediately broke up with Hunter, her attitude extremely resolute. Hunter couldn't accept it. He went to Natalie's door every day to make a scene, cursing her for being ungrateful and swindling his money and ration coupons. Natalie's father, who was a town council official, had never liked Hunter to begin with. Annoyed beyond his limits, he directly ordered someone to beat Hunter up and completely revoked the spot to return to the city that Hunter had finally managed to queue up for. Hunter's hopes of returning to the city vanished into thin air. He was penalized by the town council and sent to work in the most remote valley in town. He had to do heavy manual labor for 12 hours a day. His work credits were cut in half, and he couldn't even eat his fill. He was so starved that his face turned sallow, and he became as skinny as a monkey. Seeing how useless he was, his parents scolded him every day and only fed him leftovers and scraps. In the winter, they didn't even let him wear a thick padded coat. He was so cold that his hands and feet were covered in frostbite, festering and oozing pus, making him look incredibly pitiful. Later, who knows where he heard the news, but he found out that Emma was now living with Wyatt at the military base, eating white rice and braised pork every day. Wyatt had even been promoted to deputy battalion commander, earning a sky-high salary, and their life was incredibly prosperous. Hunter went crazy with jealousy. He went around spouting nonsense that Emma was a gold digger who abandoned him in hard times, that she used to cling to him, but stuck to Wyatt as soon as she saw him become an officer. He also claimed that Wyatt only made captain through backdoor connections and had no real ability. These rumors eventually reached the ears of the base leaders. Maliciously slandering an active duty officer was no small matter. The base leaders directly sent personnel to the town to investigate. Hunter couldn't produce a single shred of evidence and even tried to throw a tantrum. He was sternly warned by the military personnel. The town council punished him again by making him clean the public latrines for 3 months and deducting another half a year's worth of work credits. Hunter's reputation was completely ruined. Whenever the townspeople saw him, everyone spat in disgust, and even the children would run behind him, calling him a scammer and a vagrant. Driven to a dead end, he ran to the gates of the military base to find Emma, crying and begging her to meet him just once. He said he knew he was wrong and begged her to ask Wyatt to arrange a job for him. The sentries wouldn't let him in, so he squatted at the base gates every day, waiting for her to come out. Once, when Emma went out to buy groceries, she happened to run into him. He rushed forward, grabbed her arm, and tearfully pleaded, "Emma, I know I was wrong. I was a monster before. Can you forgive me? Please ask Wyatt to arrange a job for me. I'm starving to death. I don't want to go back to town to work anymore." Emma shook off his hand. Looking at his disheveled and pathetic appearance, she felt no sympathy whatsoever, only disgust. "Hunter, ending up like this today is entirely your own doing. You reap what you sow, and it has absolutely nothing to do with me. If you dare harass me again, I will report you to the police and have them take you away." Having said her piece, she turned and walked away. No matter how loudly he wailed and screamed behind her, she didn't look back even once. This kind of person wasn't worth pitying. He had ruined his own life with his own 2 hands and had no one to blame but himself. 3 months later, Emma discovered she was pregnant. When Wyatt received the news while training on the field, he literally jumped for joy on the spot. Abandoning his training entirely, he ran all the way home, swept her into his arms, spun her around in circles, and laughed like an absolute fool. He made a special request for a week off, and stayed home every single day to take care of her. He refused to let her lift a finger, personally cooking all sorts of delicious meals and finding every possible way to nourish her body. When Emma was 3 months pregnant, Wyatt was officially promoted to battalion commander. He took a special leave to bring her back to her hometown to visit her parents. They bought a mountain of gifts: malted milk, walnut powder, fruit candies, along with 10 pounds of pork and 2 pounds of brown sugar, stuffing 2 large bags full. As soon as they entered the town, they were surrounded by the locals. Everyone was incredibly warm and enthusiastic, praising Emma for being so blessed to marry such a wonderful husband, a man who was not only highly capable, but also knew how to dote on his wife. Her parents had been waiting at the edge of town bright and early. Seeing them return, they couldn't stop beaming, and hurriedly ushered them into the house. Hunter happened to be working in the fields near the town entrance. He looked sallow and emaciated, wearing clothes patched in multiple places. His hands were covered in frostbite scars, and his hair was as tangled as a bird's nest as he dug for sweet potatoes in the dirt. When he saw Emma, his eyes instantly glazed over. She was wearing a brand new wool coat, her complexion rosy, and her face healthy and full. Wyatt stood by her side, carefully supporting her as if terrified she might trip, while holding a bag of tangerines he had bought for her, peeling one to feed her. Hunter stared fixedly at her, his eyes so bloodshot they looked ready to bleed. The hoe in his hands slipped and fell to the ground. Taking advantage of the moment when no one was paying attention, he snuck around to the small dirt path leading to her parents' house and blocked the way, waiting for her. When Emma and Wyatt walked down the path, he suddenly jumped out from behind a tree, lunged in front of Emma, and dropped to his knees with a heavy thud. With tears and snot smearing his face, he wailed, "Emma, I know I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. The person I've always loved is you. Natalie is a lying, deceitful woman. I will never make you angry again. Please, can you come with me? From now on, I'll save all the refined white flour for you to eat. I'll make handmade noodles for you every single day. Can you please forgive me?" Emma looked at his pathetic display and only found it laughable. The Emma of the past had long died on that sickbed in her previous life. Now, she was Wyatt's wife, and soon she would be the mother of his children. She had absolutely nothing to do with him anymore. Wyatt took a step forward, shielding Emma behind him, his eyes as cold as ice. "If you ever dare to harass my wife again, I will personally contact your town council and have you sent straight to a labor reform camp. Try me." Hunter was so terrified he trembled violently. Not daring to utter a single word, he could only look at Emma with desperate, pleading eyes. Emma smiled. She pulled out half of a roasted sweet potato she had bought along the way from her pocket and held it out in front of him. His eyes lit up hungrily, and he reached out to take it. Just then, she let go. The roasted sweet potato fell into the mud at his feet, instantly getting coated in a thick layer of dirt. "Hunter, you keep this and eat it," Emma told him, her tone completely calm and indifferent. "I eat white rice and braised pork every day now. I can't stomach this stuff anymore," Emma said. After saying that, she linked her arm through Wyatt's and turned to walk away, not bothering to give him a single backward glance. Hunter slumped onto the dirt ground. He stared at the mud-covered half of the roasted sweet potato, then looked up at their retreating figures. Suddenly, he burst into agonizing sobs. His cries were absolutely heart-wrenching. He knew he had lost her forever. For the rest of his life, he would only ever eat sweet potatoes and coarse grains. He would never, ever have the kind of life she was living now. A year later, Emma gave birth to a healthy, handsome baby boy. Wyatt was promoted to regimental commander, and their entire family relocated to the state capital. Emma was assigned a job in the logistics department at the military base. Her life was incredibly vibrant, and her happiness was beyond compare. They also brought her parents to the capital, where the older couple spent their days helping look after their grandson, enjoying a peaceful and comfortable retirement. Later on, Emma heard from the townspeople that Hunter eventually married a fierce, shrewish woman from a neighboring town. That woman was incredibly overbearing. She scolded him for being useless every single day and would beat him at the drop of a hat. She forced him to do all the household chores and only ever fed him coarse grains and sweet potatoes for every meal. She wouldn't even let him touch a single egg. He never made it back to the city for his entire life. Even when he grew old, he would sit at the edge of town every day, gazing out toward the state capital. Clutching a freezing cold piece of sweet potato in his hand, he would constantly mutter Emma's name, consumed by a regret so agonizing it gnawed at his very core. Hearing this news, Emma only smiled, feeling absolutely no emotion toward it. The grudges and resentments of her previous life had vanished into thin air the very moment she was reborn and chose to marry Wyatt. Now, she had a loving husband, an adorable child, and a blissful family. In this lifetime, she would stay this happy forever. As for how Hunter lived or died, It no longer had anything to do with her.
Wyatt proved that true love is about actions, not excuses. Shows that walking away from someone who doesn't value you is the best way to find real happiness, while karma handles the rest.